In 2020, William Branham Historical Research received a sudden surge in questions and comments after a very sophisticated technology attack against our social media, My Local Network, and multiple Dropbox accounts, resulting in the loss of our original YouTube site and all of our videos. The most surprising part of that incident was the sudden surge in traffic and questions about Sarah Branham. Out of the tens of thousands of pages on our website and our research page for Sarah, it was constantly in the top 10 pages viewed and the number 3 most visited page of 2021. Many of the emails that we received asked the question, "Where is Sarah Branham?" My family was in contact with Sarah shortly before her disappearance and were aware of the very disturbing things that were taking place. At the same time, we were aware that there were, and still are, some very dangerous people in high-ranking positions in William Branham's message cult of personality. At the same time, I did not connect the two. Sarah Branham was William Branham's daughter, and I assumed that she would surface after a few months of missionary work, as was typical. As part of the families in William Branham's inner circle, I could easily see that this letter had sections that were sent as what I believed at the time to be an idle threat to her brothers. Paraphrased, without the cloak-and-dagger wording, it would be better titled, "Keep food on my table for my children, or I will make people aware of your hidden secrets." We began researching and publishing a short series of videos examining some of those secrets and the background of her letter. Honestly, by making them so very public, I personally hoped to flush Sarah out of hiding and just get a simple message that was saying, "I'm okay, cease and desist." My family that knew her very intimately wished the same. Some of them began helping me piece together sections of the videos. When she did not appear, we began to fear the worst. In the first half of the investigation, we focused on the reason behind Sarah's cryptic message and what her brothers were allegedly doing to her. It was primarily focused on her intent to sue her brothers before she disappeared, and her attorney died. Toward the end of the first half of the investigation, I noticed a very unusual mention of Brother Frank in Germany. The wording was unusual and not only seemed out of character for Sarah, it disrupted the flow of her letter. It read very much as though Brother Frank was the biggest threat in this letter. This, I knew, was Ewald Frank, who was for many years a very familiar face in the message throughout the United States and Canada. When I began researching Ewald Frank, I suddenly realized that I needed to come to a screeching halt and proceed with caution. There is a great deal of danger in publishing any research concerning the things that happen behind closed doors in William Branham's message cult. Like the cliché of the dark secrets surrounding the Clintons and Jeffrey Epstein, I did not want to get suicided, or worse, to put my family in danger. The message is, and has always been, a political cult disguised as a religious one. But as the operation behind closed doors shifted, the critical information became much more dangerous. While on hold, Carlos Basso, an investigator and a director at the Data Observatory of one of the universities in Chile, found my research into Sarah and Brother Frank, and he contacted me to collaborate on a project. Carlos is the world's foremost expert on the history surrounding Colonia Dignidad, one of the message cult's deepest and darkest secrets. Since my research on Colonia Dignidad was published, the Chilean government has declassified several government documents, and those documents tie Colonia Dignidad directly to the central core of the message, binding the infamous Paul Schaefer directly to William Branham himself. Carlos's book, La Secta Perfecta, or The Cult of Perfection, which became available last month, is the culmination of our research. The first half of the book combines his research with my research to give the background of Colonia Dignidad, and the second half, which is very disturbing, explains the deeper, darker secrets that surprised even me. The book is currently available only in Spanish, and I highly recommend any researchers who speak Spanish to digest the information contained in this book. There are many things that I have not been able to say in my research. It is simply too dangerous to talk about the criminal history of the message, and some of the criminals are still alive and in leadership positions. Anyone who reads La Secta Perfecta will understand exactly what I'm referring to. For the type of operations taking place in Colonia Dignidad and in the world through Colonia Dignidad, a business infrastructure is required. Those who are intelligent enough to read between the lines will fully understand what I'm referring to. And thanks to this book and his research, those of you who have asked the questions will now understand why I cannot talk about certain areas of research. I've personally purchased a copy of this book, and I've read each page using Google Translate to convert it to English. And I can affirm that not only is Carlos Basso a well-respected investigator and historian, his book is packed with fascinating and historically accurate information. La Secta Perfecta is available on Amazon and can be purchased in the link that's in this video. We will soon be sharing some of his research in detail in our YouTube channel and research pages. Here is a brief overview of the things that are to come. And to the leaders of the inner circle of the message cult and its connected business enterprises who are seeing this, we are not going to publish anything that is not already made available to the public. And besides Ewald Frank, who is already named in the criminal proceedings in Chile, through the testimony of Gerd Seewald and others, we're not going to name any people currently alive. Your business operations and flow of substantial amounts of money will continue to flow, unhindered by anything presented by this research, as it will focus only on past history. It has now become American and world history. In the early 1950s, German Baron Freri von Blomberg became one of William Branham's campaign managers and organized a tour through Germany. Von Blomberg was a strong supporter of William Branham's anti-communist revivals due to the horrific things that Russian soldiers did to his family. Branham went to Germany, and Baron von Blomberg helped William Branham establish a series of 15 offices in Sweden, Finland, Germany, Africa, Norway, Belgium, France, and 2 in Canada. Paul Schaefer, the infamous leader of Colonia Dignidad, was assigned to be William Branham's security detail. Schaefer was recruited into the message cult and became programmed to believe William Branham's end-of-days prophecies, as well as his misogynistic and abusive doctrines. Paul Schaefer was influenced by the latter-rain version of the message during the years that Reverend Jim Jones, who created a similar compound in South America, was rising to become a leader in William Branham's message sect. This is critically important because this was the early years of William Branham's manifested sons of God theology that influenced both Jim Jones and Paul Schaefer. Prior to 1963, this theology empowered numerous ministers with authoritarian control by manipulating congregants to believe that the deity was speaking directly through them as the spoken word or the voice of God. Both Jones and Schaefer used this to their advantage, and because of this, many of their congregants were either murdered or gave their lives. Though Ewald Frank denied having visited Colonia Dignidad or having known Paul Schaefer during the early years of its formation, newly classified government documents say otherwise. As Carlos Basso stated in his book, La Secta Perfecta, Schaefer was Branham's security detail in Germany when Ewald Frank personally met with Branham. It would have been highly unlikely that they would not have known each other. For this and similar reasons, the Chilean government denied Ewald Frank entrance into Chile on October 17, 2005. The declassified documents name a very significant actor in the criminal activities as a nickname, Mr. Crayfield, and Carlos Basso presents an undeniable case that Mr. Crayfield is in fact Ewald Frank. Here are some points of interest in the case for Ewald Frank. Colonia Dignidad eventually became the central intelligence hub and training center for the infamous DINA, or the National Intelligence Organization, similar to our CIA. Under the control of Augusto Pinochet, DINA was responsible in connection with the numerous human rights violations that occurred in South America. When denied entrance into Chile to visit Colonia Dignidad, Frank used DINA-backed attorneys as a defendant. It should also be mentioned that Mr. Crayfield and Schaefer were manufacturing sarin gas and planning to use it on opponents of the Pinochet regime. Like himself, Schaefer viewed Frank as one of Branham's successors, using the Manifested Sons of God framework. Congregants went to and from Ewald Frank's mission in Crayfield and Colonia Dignidad, bringing with them recorded sermons and literature of Ewald Frank. Colonia Dignidad cult victims were indoctrinated through the sermons of Paul Schaefer, Ewald Frank, and William Branham. Colonia Dignidad was comprised of members of Ewald Frank's mission in Crayfield, recruited by Frank himself. Along with those Frank recruited was Hartmut Hopp, Paul Schaefer's right-hand man and the doctor of the colony that performed experiments on its members. In 1989, the year of Sarah Branham's letter, Colonia Dignidad was at the center of a worldwide investigation, though at the time, the world was fully unaware of how critical the colony was in significant world events. The timing of magazine articles published exposing the colony, combined with Frank's advice to Sarah in her cryptic letter, are very concerning. During the 1970s and 1980s, Colonia Dignidad became a little Nazi Germany within Chile, and a key player in illegal arms deals. Dressed in Pentecostal-style dress code and believing that they were living out the reality and the aftermath of William Branham's 1977 Doomsday Prophecy, cult members in Colonia Dignidad began manufacturing everything from submachine guns to sarin gas, and using those arms to assassinate opponents of the Pinochet regime. Ultimately and successfully, they overthrew the Marxist president Salvador Allende and gave Augusto Pinochet control as a military dictator. Paul Schaefer worked closely with former Nazi SS and international arms dealer Gerhard Mertens. Mertens was at the time the most powerful arms dealer in the world. Through worldwide arms deals, significant amounts of money flowed through Colonia Dignidad. Schaefer had money in accounts or banks in Chile, the United States, Germany, the Cayman Islands, St. Kitts and Nevis, Canada, and Uruguay. As Carlos Basso pointed out, this is significant when considering the money flowing into the message cult through message cult leader Vinworth Dial in Trinidad. Dial was caught when attempting to exchange $30 million during Trinidad's crackdown on money laundering. With regards to Sarah Branham, however, the most concerning part of this story is back in Chile at Colonia Dignidad. As the central hub for DINA, all the intelligence records were also kept at Colonia Dignidad. Though message cult members and DINA officers attempted to destroy all records, 46,000 files were recovered. The files detailed the political prisoners that were tortured and interrogated inside the Colonia compound. Nazi-style torture chambers were installed, delivering an unbearable amount of pain into the bodies of victims through high-voltage probes installed in various and private parts of the body. Those marked with an indicator for death were sent to Nazi-style gas chambers that were installed in Colonia. The operation successfully installed Augusto Pinochet as a military dictator in Chile. And once Pinochet was ousted from power and his regime became the target of an investigation for human rights violations, anyone and everyone involved had very good reason to cover all trails. This was not limited to cult leaders in the message cult. The United States government was directly involved. Under orders by President Nixon, who William Branham knew personally, the CIA and the United States forces cooperated with Dinah to install Pinochet. Nixon and key players in Washington allegedly visited William Branham's home in Jeffersonville. Schaefer's friend and partner, Gerhard Martens, was directly linked to the Iran-Contra affair that lasted until 2 years prior to Sarah Branham's cryptic letter. The most concerning part of this, as it relates to Sarah Branham, is the investigation that followed. Numerous people were killed as a result of Colonia Dignidad's work with the CIA and Dinah. An elaborate system was created to dispose of the bodies, and many people simply disappeared. Planes carried bodies out of Colonia Dignidad, dropping them into the Pacific Ocean, never to be found. Others were buried in mass graves, and their bodies were incinerated and covered by earth moved by caterpillars. The decomposition and the disposal of bodies by message cult members in Colonia Dignidad was so thorough that very few of them, if any, could ever be identified. Why did Sarah Branham inject this statement about Brother Frank in Germany? Did Ewald Frank really advise Sarah to keep away from the United States court system? Did Sarah seek refuge with Frank in Germany? And if so, where did Frank house Sarah and her family? There are so many disturbing questions surrounding William Branham's message cult of personality. In the second part of the Sarah Branham investigation, we shift focus to the history of Colonia Dignidad. How many leaders in the message knew about the colony? Of the churches in the United States that openly invited Ewald Frank to speak, how many of those churches were in partnership with his business operations? Stay tuned as we examine La Secta Perfecta.